Good morning, Alex and friends. I'm Grace. Today is Saturday, August 2nd, 2025, and you're listening to Alex's News. The weather in Riverside will reach a high of 93.8 degrees Fahrenheit today, with a low of 64.4. It's going to be a warm one, so stay hydrated and seek shade if you're out and about. Coming up on Alex's News, we'll dive into an important question. Can we still trust federal economic data? We'll explore the factors influencing its reliability and what that means for us. Plus, we'll examine how recent tariffs implemented by the Trump administration are profoundly reshaping global trade dynamics and what these changes mean for economies worldwide. All this and more coming up on Alex's News. Stay tuned. Welcome back. We begin our broadcast this morning with a groundbreaking and controversial development that has sent ripples through Washington and Wall Street. Yesterday, Friday, August 1st, President Donald Trump ordered the immediate dismissal of Erica McIntyre, the Commissioner of the Bureau of Labor Statistics, or BLS, following the release of a particularly disheartening employment report for July. This decision has ignited a fierce debate about the integrity of federal economic data. Joining us now to break down this significant story is our national affairs reporter, Ethan. Ethan, this certainly seems to be a major shakeup. What exactly prompted the president's swift action?
Grace, it certainly has been a whirlwind 24 hours. President Trump's directive, which he announced on his social media platform Truth Social, came on the heels of the BLS's July 2025 employment report. Simply put, the report painted a very bleak picture of the U.S. labor market, and the president was not pleased, to say the least.
I understand the report was dismal. Can you elaborate on the specific numbers that seemingly pushed the president to make this controversial move? It sounds like the jobs report really dropped the ball.
Indeed, Grace. The numbers were quite a blow. According to reporting from Yahoo News and U.S. News and World Report, the BLS report showed that only 73,000 jobs were added in July, which was far below what economists had anticipated. What was even more concerning, and perhaps what really fueled the president's anger, were the substantial downward revisions to previously reported job gains. The Philadelphia Inquirer and Associated Press highlighted that May's job gains were revised sharply downward from an initial 139,000 to a mere 19,000, and June's figures were slashed from 147,000 to just 14,000. This amounted to a combined 258,000 fewer jobs created in May and June than previously estimated, and the unemployment rate also ticked up to 4.2% from 4.1%.
So these revisions were the heart of the matter. What was the president's rationale for firing Commissioner McIntyre beyond just the bad numbers? Did he accuse her of something specific?
He did, Grace. President Trump directly linked McIntyre's removal to what he called the, quote, dismal figures, end quote. On Truth Social, he alleged, without providing any evidence, that the jobs figures were, quote, manipulated for political reasons, end quote, and, quote, rigged, end quote, to make Republicans and himself, quote, look bad, end quote. He stated, quote, I have directed my team to fire this Biden political appointee immediately, end quote, and declared she would be, quote, replaced with someone much more competent and qualified, end quote, according to the Philadelphia Inquirer and WashingtonPost.com.
That's quite an accusation. For those unfamiliar, who is Erica McIntyre, and was her dismissal unusual given her position?
Erica McIntyre was indeed a political appointee, nominated by former President Joe Biden in 2023 and confirmed by the Senate in January 2024 with a strong bipartisan vote of 86-8. Interestingly, even now Vice President J.D. Vance voted in favor of her confirmation, as Yahoo News noted. While BLS commissioners typically serve 4-year terms, as a political appointee, she could be removed by the president. It's important to note she was the only political appointee in an agency of hundreds of career civil servants, according to U.S. News and World Report. Her outright dismissal is unprecedented in recent history.
Unprecedented indeed. How have economists, former officials, and political leaders reacted to this move? I imagine it has stirred up a hornet's nest.
It absolutely has, Grace. The move was widely condemned. Labor Secretary Lori Chavez de Romer did confirm McIntyre's departure on X, formerly Twitter, and supported the president's decision, saying it would, quote, ensure the American people can trust the important and influential data coming from BLS, end quote. However, a chorus of economists and former BLS commissioners, including William Beach, who was appointed by Trump, and Erica Grosjean, appointed by Obama, stated the rationale was, quote, without merit and undermines the credibility of federal economic statistics, end quote, as reported by U.S. News and World Report. Democratic Senate Leader Chuck Schumer of New York warned of significant damage to trust in core American institutions, stating, quote, what does a bad leader do when they get bad news? Shoot the messenger, end quote, according to Yahoo News. The WashingtonPost.com also reported that the disappointing jobs figures had an immediate impact on financial markets, causing U.S. market indexes to drop by about 1.5% yesterday.
That's a significant market reaction. The BLS data has historically been considered the, quote, gold standard, end quote. Does this firing truly threaten that long-held perception? And are there any historical precedents for such challenges to data integrity?
That's a critical question, Grace. For years, economists and Wall Street investors have indeed viewed U.S. government economic data, including jobs reports, as the, quote, gold standard, end quote, generally free from political bias. President Trump's claims certainly threaten to undermine this perception, according to Yahoo News. While an outright dismissal of a BLS commissioner appears to be a first, there are historical instances of presidents challenging data integrity, though usually not with a direct firing. PolitiFact.com and Marketplace.org detail examples like the Nixon administration in 1971, which, frustrated with unemployment numbers, sought to influence the BLS by transferring senior officials and canceling press conferences. The Hoover administration also faced accusations of undercounting unemployment during the Great Depression. So while the underlying tension isn't new, the direct firing is a stark modern escalation.
Fascinating historical context, but also concerning. The BLS itself acknowledged the revisions to the May and June jobs reports were, quote, larger than normal, end quote. Are there legitimate methodological reasons for these large adjustments that don't imply manipulation?
Absolutely, Grace. The BLS acknowledges that revisions are routine, but these were indeed bigger than usual. FoxBusiness.com reported that while large, the magnitude doesn't necessarily indicate data manipulation. Several factors can explain this. A primary reason is the declining response rate to the establishment survey, which is the foundational data source for these figures. According to DOL.gov, response rates have dropped from around 70% pre-pandemic to an abysmal 43% recently. This impacts initial estimates because early responding firms are often larger companies, and data from smaller businesses, which are perhaps more susceptible to economic shifts, arrives later, leading to downward revisions. The WashingtonPost.com also pointed to the BLS's increased reliance on statistical imputation to compensate for missing data, and changes in seasonal adjustments can also lead to significant shifts. Also, the annual benchmarking process, where survey estimates are recalibrated with more comprehensive tax records, has sometimes shown initial overstatements of job growth. So while concerning, there are technical explanations.
That provides some much-needed context. With Commissioner McIntyre out, who is now leading the Bureau of Labor Statistics?
Grace, William Wietrowski has been named acting director, marking his third time in this role, as reported by Politico.com. Wietrowski is a career official with a long history at the BLS, serving as deputy commissioner since 2015. He also acted as commissioner during parts of the first Trump administration and again more recently. He is highly experienced, with degrees from Yale and George Washington University, and has authored numerous articles on employee benefits and compensation, according to BLS.gov.
So an experienced hand at the helm, at least for now. Finally, what are the institutional safeguards in place to protect agencies like the BLS? And what steps are being considered in response to this particular firing to reinforce those safeguards? It feels like our economic data needs to be beyond reproach.
It certainly does, Grace. The U.S. federal statistical system operates under a framework of laws like the Foundations for Evidence-Based Policymaking Act of 2018, designed to ensure autonomy and credibility. However, this firing has brought those safeguards under intense scrutiny. There have been immediate calls for congressional oversight hearings into McIntyre's dismissal to seek clarity. TheGuardian.com reported that economists like Bill Beach have urged investment in modernizing the U.S. statistical system, emphasizing that federal data is the, quote, lifeblood of the U.S. economy, end quote. There is also a push for legislation that would require the president to show, quote, just cause, end quote, before removing the BLS commissioner and institute a mandatory delay period, before a removal can take effect to allow for oversight. Petitions are also circulating, calling on Congress to enact legal protections for the BLS's independence, as ResistBot indicated. The hope is to strengthen the buffers against political pressure.
Ethan, that was a very thorough and illuminating report on a truly significant story. Thank you for untangling all those threads for us.
My pleasure, Grace.
We'll be right back with more news after this short break. Welcome back, everyone. For our second story this morning, we are turning our attention to the global economic stage, where President Donald Trump has certainly been stirring the pot with his latest trade policies. To help us navigate these choppy trade waters, we are joined by our expert reporter, Chloe. Chloe, thanks for being with us. Can you break down these sweeping new tariffs for us?
Thanks, Grace. It certainly feels like President Trump is playing a high-stakes game of economic chess. Just yesterday, on August 1st, 2025, mere hours before a critical deadline, the president signed an executive order imposing new, higher tariffs ranging from 10% to 41% on imports from nearly 70 countries. This powerful move invoked emergency powers, following his April 2nd declaration of a national emergency concerning the trade deficit, according to reporting from Deutsche Welle. These new modified tariffs are set to take effect for most countries 5 days from now, on August 7, 2025, with a one-week pause for Switzerland.
Wow, that's a rapid rollout. So, this isn't just about the biggest players, but a wide net then?
Absolutely, Grace. And it gets more granular. In a significant policy shift, the U.S. will also suspend what's known as the de minimis exemption for all low-value imports starting 27 days from now, on August 29, 2025. This means any goods valued at $800 or less will now be subject to country-specific tariff rates, as uncovered by Claude Sonnet 4's U.S. Overhaul Report. Plus, we've seen specific tariffs under Section 232 of the Trade Expansion Act of 1962, citing national security. For example, a 50% tariff on Australian steel and aluminum, up from 25%, and a 25% tariff on automobiles and light trucks.
That's quite a lot to unpack. On the other hand, we've heard about some bilateral deals. Have any of these trade skirmishes actually led to agreements?
They certainly have, Grace, showing that President Trump's strategy isn't just about tariffs, but also about intense negotiations. Take the European Union. According to Deutsche Welle and Gemini 2.5 Pro, on July 27, 2025, the US and EU reached an agreement for a 15% baseline tariff on most European goods. In return, the EU committed to no duties on U.S. firms, purchasing $750 billion in U.S. energy and investing approximately $600 billion in the U.S. by 2028. Though this deal still needs unanimous approval from all 27 EU member states, and as of today, it's not yet legally binding.
So, not exactly a done deal for the EU then? What about other major trading partners?
Well, the UK was actually the first to strike a deal back in May, facing a 10% base tariff rate, and they are still negotiating exemptions for steel and aluminum. Japan, in a July 2025 deal, saw U.S. tariffs set at 15% for their goods, including automobiles, which account for a significant portion of their exports to the U.S. Japan also pledged $550 billion in U.S. investments, as reported by Deutsche Welle. And South Korea, after recent negotiations, secured a 15% baseline tariff, down from a threatened 25%, agreeing to substantial investments in purchases of U.S. energy and agricultural goods.
It sounds like there's a lot of give and take, Chloe. But not everyone is getting a sweet deal, are they? What about the countries still facing escalating tensions?
That's where things get really interesting, Grace. China, for instance, remains a special case. They're in a 90-day tariff truce set to expire in just 10 days on August 12, 2025, according to reporting by Gemini 2.5 Flash and Claude Sonnet 4. Recent high-level talks in Stockholm concluded without a formal agreement to extend this pause, leaving the future uncertain. Should the deadline pass without a new deal, tariffs could revert to their triple-digit pre-truce levels, which analysts warn could effectively become a trade embargo.
A trade embargo is quite a strong word. What are the sticking points with China?
It's quite complex, Grace. According to Claude Sonnet 4, the U.S. is concerned about China's continued purchases of Russian oil, industrial overcapacity, and sales of dual-use technology to Russia. Meanwhile, China has pressed on fentanyl-related tariffs. Other nations are also feeling the heat. Switzerland, for example, now faces a significantly higher 39% duty, up from 31%, greatly impacting their pharmaceutical and watch industries, as detailed by Deutsche Welle and the Detroit News. Interpharma, the Association of Drug Research Companies in Switzerland, has warned of, quote, enormous economic damage, end quote.
Enormous economic damage. That's a stark warning. Are there other countries facing similar challenges without clear agreements?
Yes, Grace. Brazil faces a threatened 50% tariff due to political differences, with President Trump demanding the release of former President Jair Bolsonaro. India was hit with a 25% tariff, plus an additional penalty, due to its large trade surplus and continued trade ties with Russia, according to Deutsche Welle. Mexico saw existing tariffs extended for 90 days to allow for further negotiations on border security. And Canada faced a tariff hike from 25% to 35% on August 1, 2025, in addition to existing tariffs on cars, steel, and aluminum, citing various reasons including Canada's plans to recognize a Palestinian state.
These trade actions must be having a real impact on the U.S. economy, given how widespread they are. What are we seeing on the economic front?
The economic consequences are certainly being felt, Grace. According to The Guardian's August 1st reporting, the U.S. economy added a significantly lower than expected 73,000 jobs in July, falling far short of the 109,000 forecast. This slowdown was largely attributed to the pressures of Trump's escalating trade war. The unemployment rate also rose to 4.2% in July, up from 4.1% in June. What's more, the Bureau of Labor made substantial downward revisions to previous month's job figures, cutting a combined 258,000 jobs previously reported for May and June. The president even fired the Commissioner of Labor Statistics, Erica McIntyre, alleging she, quote, faked, end quote, the figures.
So the job market is taking a hit. What about the broader economic picture, like GDP?
Well, the U.S. GDP grew at 3% in the second quarter, recovering from a 0.5% decline in the first quarter, with this volatility attributed to Trump's tariff policies. The U.S. economy grew at a, quote, sluggish, end quote, 1.2% in the first half of the year, down from the 2.5% average pace in 2024, as also reported by The Guardian. Even some Trump-appointed Federal Reserve policymakers have publicly advocated for interest rate cuts, citing increasing signs of fragility in the labor market.
And what's the administration's stated goal with all these tariffs?
The administration's stated goal is that tariffs will protect American industries, encouraging domestic production and job creation, Grace. This aligns with what's known as the infant industry theory. But most economists and historical precedents like the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act of 1930 caution against such protectionist measures. They argue that trade deficits are more influenced by macroeconomic factors like national savings and investment rates, not just trade policy. In fact, some critics have even started nicknaming President Trump Taco, which stands for Trump always chickens out, according to Deutsche Welle, referencing his on-again, off-again tariff policies.
Taco. That's quite a bit of wordplay for such a serious topic. Chloe, thank you for breaking down this complex and evolving situation for us. It certainly sheds a lot of light on the economic ripples we're seeing.
My pleasure, Grace.
We appreciate you joining us this morning. Here are some other headlines. The Corporation for Public Broadcasting is set to go off the air permanently. After more than half a century, the organization announced it will cease operations following a congressional vote to rescind its federal funding. The move was pushed by the Trump administration and conservatives who have long accused public media of liberal bias. The closure will have a profound impact on PBS, NPR, and over 1,500 local public stations, especially those in rural areas that rely on the funding for educational programming and emergency alerts. The CPB was instrumental in developing iconic shows like Sesame Street and Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, but it seems the final curtain is falling on the funding source for Big Bird and Company. An orderly wind-down is planned, with most operations ending by September 2025. In what some are calling a shot of bad medicine, the CDC has ousted the American Medical Association, the American Academy of Pediatrics, and 7 other prominent medical groups from its vaccine advisory work groups. An email from the agency stated the organizations are now considered special interest groups, with an expected bias that could influence recommendations. This shakeup follows the dismissal of all 17 sitting members of the advisory committee in June by HHS Secretary Robert F. Kennedy, Jr., who appointed several vaccine skeptics in their place. The ousted medical groups released a joint statement calling the decision irresponsible and dangerous, warning it will undermine public trust in vaccines and could lead to confusing guidance for patients. An investigation has revealed a potential bug in Microsoft's security protocols, and it's a big one. The tech giant has been using engineers based in China to support its SharePoint software. The very same product recently compromised by Chinese state-sponsored hackers to access the systems of U.S. agencies, like the Department of Homeland Security. For a decade, Microsoft also used foreign workers to maintain the Pentagon's cloud systems, raising questions about whether the firewall between the company's global workforce and U.S. national security was strong enough. Following the revelation, Microsoft announced it is moving the SharePoint work to another location and has halted the use of China-based engineers for Defense Department support. Up in Alaska, schools are getting a failing grade in structural integrity. A deepening budget crisis, fueled by years of declining oil revenue, has left the state without the funds to repair its deteriorating school buildings. Hundreds of requests from rural districts to fix leaking roofs, failing foundations, and black mold have been ignored. Lawmakers managed to pass a mere $40 million for repairs this session, but Governor Mike Dunleavy then vetoed more than 2/3 of it. It's a harsh lesson in fiscal crisis, with students in some communities now attending class in buildings at risk of collapse. And finally, states are bracing for new Medicaid work requirements, but a look back at Michigan's experience suggests the policy might not be a healthy solution. A new federal law will require able-bodied adults to work at least 80 hours a month to keep their health coverage, starting in 2027. But a similar program in Michigan cost the state over $30 million for just a few months of operation before a judge halted it in 2020. A similar experiment in Arkansas led to 18,000 people losing coverage with no significant increase in employment. Critics now worry the new federal mandate will create costly bureaucracy and cause people to lose their insurance, rather than find a job. That's all we have for now. Today's episode was made by Alexander King with Claude Sonnet 4.0, Gemini Pro 2.5, Gemini Flash 2.5, and Google Cloud Text-to-Speech. I hope you have a great day. I'll see you tomorrow, Alex.